Welcome to another week, another show of Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara. Anxious and excited to talk to you as always and looking forward to it. Thanks for making us number one in late night as you have been. And boy, I can't thank you enough for that. Fox 28, very happy with that. So keep viewing, keep spreading the word. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much. Got another great show lined up for you today, and I think you'll think so after viewing it. Joe Mershman will join me here in just a moment with Mershman Seeds, the Mershman Minute. And then also our buddy David Eicholt, the Hawkeye Insider, HawkeyeInsider.com. Looking forward to catching up with him. Then also the quarterback, James Vandenberg, former Iowa Hawkeye quarterback, will join us as he usually does. And then Jeff Horner will close out the show as Jeff usually does. Jeff, a former Iowa Hawkeye basketball playing great, and looking forward to catching up with all those guys. And as I mentioned it, there he is, Joe Mershman. Joins me on the screen here as always. Joe, thanks so much for joining me. And secondly, how's everything going with you? I hear there's big meetings, big doings going on at Mershman Seeds. What's happening, my friend?
Well, believe it or not, it's 2022 for us. And right now we're in with our salespeople on a virtual meeting. And we're a little bit, when we look at the competition, it's kind of, for us, it's like the Big Ten. I mean, any other seed company in another day can beat us. I mean, so we've got to be on our A game all the time. We got to bring everything we can. And one of the things we look at is we kind of review this past year, how things are going. And it's kind of like watching film and seeing where you make mistakes, where you can make improvements. But we try to get better every year because that's what a farmer has to do. A farmer has to grow more grain every year if he's going to stay profitable, because that's just the way it is. The costs keep going up. So right now we're getting our plans ready for 2022, because believe it or not, it's going to be here real quick. And that even includes, what products we're going to plant. That's all those decisions are made already. So busy time for 2022 right now.
Love it, Joe. And it works so well into societally, but also into athletics. Everybody's trying to get better every day, and you are the living and breathing embodiment of that, you and Mershman Seeds. So, my friend, thanks so much as always for joining us, and look forward to catching up with you next week, Joe.
Thank you, Dave.
And as you can see, I've located David Eicholt, the Hawkeye Insider, HawkeyeInsider.com. Got it all covered for us, wall-to-wall Iowa Hawkeyes. David's personal Twitter handle, you see it right there on the bottom of the screen. Also, at Hawkeyes on 24/7 via social media as well. So first and foremost, as always, David, thanks so much for joining us. And secondly, how's everything going with you, my friend?
Everything is going good, Dave. Always appreciate you having me on your show.
Well, you're very welcome, and I always appreciate you joining us. So let's do this. I'm going to talk with Jeff Horner in more detail about Chris Street 28 years ago to this day and this date. Tuesday, January 19th, 1993. Today, obviously, we record this on Tuesdays as always. It is January 19th of 2021. So Chris Street, former Iowa Hawkeye basketball playing great, passed away 28 years ago to this day. So David's going to go into more detail with me when he joins me on radio later this week. It airs over the weekend on Saturday on WMT 600 radio and 800 KXIC on Sundays, as well as online at DaveO'HaraSports.com. So check that out. David and I are going to go more detail about Chris Street. But also, David and I are going to talk briefly here about the Iowa Hawkeyes in the NFL before we get to Hawkeye basketball, the number 4 team in the country. David, 9 Hawkeyes right now, leads the NFL going into championship weekend with the 4 remaining teams of the Packers, the Buccaneers, the Chiefs, and the Bills. I'm going to step out of the way and let you talk about those 9 guys for a second, if you would, please, or mention them, please.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Iowa is, there's 9 former Hawkeyes in the NFL playoffs still. No other school has more than 7. I believe LSU and Ohio State were second in that category. But Iowa well represented all across the board, Dave. I mean, you think about Ike Bucker, Micah Hyde, AJ Epinesa, Anthony Nelson, Tristan Wirfs, Christian Kirksey, Ben Neiman, Anthony Hitchens. I mean, it just really goes on and on. It just goes to show that another year, it's going to be another couple of Hawkeyes that eventually get the Super Bowl trophy. But it should be an exciting weekend and probably the best slate of a Final Four teams, Dave, I think we've seen in quite some time. I'm very excited for it myself.
Yeah, and we're going to go into more detail with James Vandenberg about those 9 guys and his experience with some of those guys, as you mentioned, and Josh Jackson with the Packers as well. And, you mentioned Kirksey and Hitchens and Neiman with the Chiefs, and just so much to talk about. And obviously, Tristan Wirfs and Anthony Nelson with the Buccaneers, but and Betker Epinesa and Micah Hyde, who James has mentioned in the past, he knows very well too. So we're going to get into all that with James and James Vandenberg, the former Hawkeye quarterback, in the next segment. And then you and I will talk more about that on radio as well upcoming. But can't wait to talk to you about that. But let's get to the Hawkeye, top 4 Hawkeyes. We got about 2.5 minutes here left to talk about the Hawkeyes in this segment with you. I'm a little surprised, as were you, and you mentioned that on social media, that the Hawks are number 4 and not number 3. Villanova hasn't played in almost a month. They got a game tonight as we record this on Tuesday, but and the listeners, obviously, and the viewers will know about that on Friday night when they watch and listen to this show tonight or over the weekend on Friday. But I'll tell you this, David, the Hawks, I thought it would be Gonzaga, Baylor, and Iowa, as you mentioned on Twitter, and then the rest. But Villanova snuck in at number 3, the Hawkeyes at number 4. Still, for number 4 in the AP, Hawks rolling into that Indiana game on Thursday. Again, the viewers will know what happened when they see this show. But let's talk about that game and the number 4 ranked Hawkeyes and the Hoosiers coming into Carver Hawkeye on Thursday night.
I'll say this, Dave, as you mentioned, Villanova remains number 3 despite not playing for 3 weeks. And it's funny how Iowa football doesn't play, but they drop in the rankings. But Villanova still somehow sits at number 3 while Iowa continues to pick up quality wins at home and on the road. But obviously welcoming in Indiana, the Hoosiers, not quite the Hoosiers of old, Dave. I mean, they've had a really tough time guarding the perimeter. They're the 3rd worst perimeter defense in the Big Ten, while Iowa is the best shooting team from deep in the Big Ten. Trace Jackson-Davis is one of the most elite players in the country, leading the way for the Hoosiers. But with the way the Iowa offense is rolling in a red-hot Jordan Bohannon, and we saw C.J. Frederick and Joe Wieskamp get back on track, if Iowa's hitting from the perimeter and Luka Garza can do what Luka Garza normally does, I see the Hawks rolling by at least 15 to 20 points in this one, Dave.
Would be a nice one to send Coach Miller and the Hoosiers back to Indiana with a loss, that's for sure. And David, the Hawks now in first place in the Big Ten with Michigan, who got beaten pretty handily last week. So we got that going for us. The Hawks number 4 in the country. Luka Garza against Northwestern on national TV last Sunday. 17 points, 10 rebounds, a double-double. Didn't get to that 20-point plateau he normally does because he didn't even play the last 10 minutes of the game effectively or essentially because they were so far ahead. But 4 other Hawkeyes in double figures with him. The bench guys still doing what the bench guys do. 15 seconds here on that performance, or 20 seconds or so if you give me your takeaway from that huge win against Northwestern at Northwestern last Sunday.
Yeah, Marvel's Thanos is Iowa Hoop's biggest fan right now because it was all perfectly balanced as the way things always should be. Bench continues to be great, and Iowa's, I think, playing their best basketball of the season.
Well done and well stated as always. Bringing a little Marvel Comics reference. I love it, Dave. But by the way, again, be sure to stay tuned over the weekend on radio again. WMT on Saturday mornings, KXIC on Sunday mornings throughout the corridor, 318, 218, 380 corridor every Saturday and Sunday morning on WMT and KXIC, but also at DaveO'HaraSports.com Sundays afternoon Central Time. You can listen to those shows. David and I will take more of a deep dive into some of these topics we've just brushstroked today. So, David, thanks so much. Catch up with you next week, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
My pleasure as always. Stay tuned for more of Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara, as James Vandenberg, the former quarterback, joins us, and Jeff Horner, former Hawkeye basketball playing great. Back with more in just a few moments.
One word means more to farmers than any other: yield. Nobody knows this better than your friend in the field, Mershman Seeds. With industry-leading seed treatments like Trepidity ST, you'll see faster emergence and more bushels per acre. Become a part of the Mershman family and see the difference in your field. Ask your dealer for superiority, Mershman Seeds.
Welcome back. I have located James Vandenberg, as you can see on the screen. This is Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara. Always appreciate having James Vandenberg join us, the quarterback, the former Iowa Hawkeye quarterback, part of that RBC Wealth Management team, CorridorInvestmentGroup.com. Check it out. You'll be glad you did. James, let's get to it right away. I'm very excited, as always, to talk to you. But last week, I got great comments back from the viewers and on radio from the listeners talking about what you and I were talking about last week, getting players ready for development after their playing days at the Iowa Hawkeyes, going to the NFL. But before we get there and pick that conversation up, and it's going to be an ongoing conversation with you and me for the viewers, I wanted to ask you directly and kind of get your insights. You and I talked a little bit weeks past about Ike Betker with the Buffalo Bills and Micah Hyde with the Bills, formerly of the Packers. There are a lot of other guys in the NFL, and I just talked to David Eichholt, the Hawkeye Insider, about that the segment before. The Hawkeyes lead the NFL with 9 guys, former Hawkeye players, going into championship weekend with the Packers and Buccaneers and, of course, the Chiefs and the Bills. So I'm going to let you talk about the guys. If I start mentioning names, I'm going to drop a few off. But, of course, Ike and Micah with the Bills, Ike Betker and Micah Hyde. But I'm going to let you talk about some of the guys throughout the NFL that you either played with or have good association with, please.
Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting, and it's an awesome thing to have so many Hawkeyes playing this weekend. I mean, we got a lot of Hawkeyes in the NFL right now. It seems like I don't know if we're at an all-time high, but it seems like we're close to it. And Anthony Nelson and Wirfs and Micah and Kirksey and Hitchens and Betker. And I mean, we've got a lot of them. I know most of them, but I missed a lot of them by a year or two. But Hitchens, Kirksey, and Micah all played with me. Hitchens and Kirksey were a couple of years younger. Micah graduated with me. I mean, they're world-class guys. I remember me and Rick Stanzi had like a $20 bet the first time we ever watched Chris Kirksey in practice. And it was $20 on that he would be first team all Big Ten. And what's funny is he was a stud player and he never ended up being first team all Big Ten, which was ridiculous. And now he's like a Pro Bowler that plays for the Packers and just a world-class guy. But Hitchens was interesting. I feel like he played like every position in Iowa, safety, running back. Then he ended up at linebacker, and in the box, he hits people about as hard as anybody could ever hit somebody. So, and I think I've told you before, I mean, Micah could be an all-pro receiver as well as a DB. So those are the three guys I overlapped with. And I'm sure I'm leaving some of those guys out, but all good players and more importantly, all really good guys.
Well, and what a rookie season. You mentioned Wirfs. I mean, goodness gracious, as a rookie, All-Pro, has protected Tom Brady throughout the year. And I got to say, when you mentioned Anthony Nelson, he had a big play in the playoff game against the Saints. I mean, as you mentioned, just sprinkled throughout the NFL, not to mention Fant and Jewell with the Broncos, who didn't make the playoffs, Hawkinson with the Lions. I mean, like you said, obviously George Kittle, C.J. Beathard, who you mentioned when C.J. was a freshman.
Was playing last weekend. I mean, we have a lot in the NFL right now.
Yeah, so when we start mentioning names, we're going to drop a few off, and I apologize. But yeah, the show's only so long. We can only get so much in. But I want to follow up on something that you mentioned. I'm presuming that you had the bet that Hitchens would be all pro or all Big Ten, and Kirksey, I'm sorry, and you lost the bet, right?
No, I was betting he would be first team all Big Ten. I vividly remember he was like a really skinny, 195-pound kid out of St. Louis, super nice. His locker was right by me. And I remember he played outside linebacker, and you could tell he could run. But, man, when he would come up and hit people, there was like a different noise. And we looked at each other, and I was like, man, if that guy ever weighs 225, he's going to just kill people.
So did you ever get hit by him in practice and drills, or you had the red jersey on and didn't touch it?
I had the red jersey, and Chris is such a nice guy. He would never slip up and hit me. But, yeah, no, I never had to deal with it, but other people did.
So did you ever pay Rick Stanzi the $20?
Well, I don't believe so, no. But we did retouch on that when we talked here a year ago. And I actually was talking with Kirksey because I thought I had won the bet. See, I graduated. Kirksey was like a sophomore, so he played 2 more years. But then I never realized that he never was first team all Big Ten. I mean, I thought that was a shoo-in, a guarantee.
Amen. Same here. And now that you say that, but I love those stories, as you mentioned, and the viewers do as well. And you take us inside, and when you see these guys come in, and that's what I was going to ask you when we're leading into this week's talk, like we did last week, their careers post-playing career. And when Ike Betker first went, and I know Ike was just a little bit after you, but when Ike went to the Bills, and I talked to him about a year ago and did a radio hit with him, he joined me on one of my radio shows, and Cedar Falls kid, and when he went there to the Bills, he was kind of practice squad, not practice squad, kind of on the periphery. Now he's starting and playing, and it's got to be fascinating for you when you talk about, we did last week about guys getting ready for the NFL after their Iowa playing days. But you see these guys coming in, and you mentioned Kirksey being thin or smaller, and then he gets bulked up for the NFL at Iowa as the years go on, and same with Betker. Hawkeyed you knew was going to be great, but that's got to be fascinating for you as a former player to see the guys you knew back when, and now you see them today.
Well, yeah, you can just, you play long enough, and especially when you're a junior or senior at Iowa, you've seen freshmen come in, and you can tell the one. Kittle was another one that was like a no-brainer on, man, if this kid actually can weigh over 200 pounds, like, wow, he's so fast. But yeah, it's really neat, and it speaks to the quality of the program. We get a lot of guys that are talented, and maybe they're not Alabama or Iowa, and that's how they're picking. But that doesn't mean we're not getting talented guys that can turn into real special players. And a lot of those guys kind of speak exactly to that.
You know, and when you mentioned that, so when guys come in, and you mentioned Kirksey didn't talk much, he was a great guy, and that's the intriguing thing to me too. When you come into that program, you know what to expect, or you know there's guys ahead of you, and you're like, well, I want to be like that. A lot of we hear that a lot, especially like a guy like Epaneston. He wanted to learn, you know, at the feet of Parker Hesse and Nelson. It was really interesting that as good as AJ Epinesa was, even as a sophomore than a junior, is that just kind of a natural thing, or is that ingrained in your head when you come into Iowa that you're here and you're going to get here eventually? I'm fascinated by how nice these guys are.
I think that's a testament to how good a job they do on the recruiting side, because I think that's all from their parents and that gets transferred into the program. I don't think there's some sign that you just walk in and you know to kind of follow suit. I think they're doing a good job of looking at who a kid is in high school, how he's handling that success, and then understanding how he'll probably jump to the next level. And that's a testament of character to me. And they're doing a good job on the recruiting side of that. And it works the opposite too. You can tell the guys that come in and that don't think they're gonna, they want to jump to the front of the line and everything. And those guys tend to maybe not have as good a careers at Iowa as some others. But Epinesa, Kirksey, these guys just came in so humble and just ready to work, and that's what you're looking for. That's what we look for at Iowa.
Well stated, and definitely Iowa nice ringing through, even if these kids aren't from Iowa when they get to Iowa. Iowa nice through and through. James, great talking with you as always. Man, our time goes quickly, and thanks again for joining us. I look forward to catching up with you next week and continuing this conversation in and around. We'll see what Hawkeyes are going to the Super Bowl next week when you and I talk, but always a pleasure. I look forward to catching up with you next week, and thanks so much, James.
Thanks, Dave.
My pleasure as always. He is James Vandenberg with RBC Wealth Management, part of that corridorinvestmentgroup.com in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa area, the 218 corridor, the 380 corridor. Check it out. You'll be glad you did. We'll close out the show next segment with Jeff Horner, former Iowa Hawkeye basketball playing great. This is Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara. Back with more in a few moments.
There is a spot for women in agriculture. There's many places for females, for female farmers. We can do a lot. Over the years, maybe we couldn't have always done everything, but there's lots of places we're finding on our dairy farm especially that females are really good at milking cows. They're really good caretakers. They're good at taking care of animals and observant and detail-oriented, which fits in well on a farm and can make an operation more successful.
Welcome back to Hawkeyed with me, Dave O'Hara. As you can see on the screen, I've located my buddy Jeff Horner. Jeff, former Iowa Hawkeye basketball playing great, now the head coach at Truman State University, going into year 3. Man, oh man, his Bulldogs are on a roll. 10-1 and won their last 5 in a row. Going to be in the top 10 in the country pretty soon, I know. They went from 7, had an upset in the road, a bump in the road, went back to 13, up to 12. And Jeff, I don't even know if the rankings have come out yet as we record this on Tuesday afternoon. Usually it's on Tuesdays or comes out a little later. First and foremost, as always, thanks for joining us. And secondly, how's everything going, and have those rankings come out yet?
Yep. Thanks, Dave. Things are going good. And actually, they just came out about 10 minutes ago, and we moved up to number 10. So we're, I guess you could say, back in the top 10.
Beautiful. Congratulations. And Iowa Hawkeyes, number 4. I don't know about Villanova. They played tonight, but they haven't played a game in over a month. Again, we'll record this on Tuesday afternoon. It airs on Friday night and online after the fact. But you got, obviously, Gonzaga at number 1. Baylor with a big victory over KU last night on Monday Night Basketball on ESPN. They beat KU. And KU, as I mentioned to you on radio yesterday, I think they're going to drop out of the top 25. And it's just really interesting in basketball this year, not just because of that loss, but they've been hammered the last couple of games KU has, and just don't think they have the team they normally do. But you've got Gonzaga, Baylor, I thought Iowa, and then the rest. But Iowa comes in at number 4 in the AP, Villanova at number 3. But I'd like to say something to you, a couple of things before, I'll mention this real quick. For the first time in a great number of years, North Carolina, Kentucky, and Duke aren't in the top 25, and I think in another week, KU won't be in the top 25. How wild is that for you to comprehend the changing in college basketball without those 3 standard bearers in the top 25?
Yeah, it's crazy. I just think that it's, the league, just in general, the NCAA, college basketball is just, people are just getting better. And I think there's better coaches coming in there's players that are coming in and going to different schools and trying new things and that type of thing. And, in saying that, and, I hate saying this, but those coaches are also, getting older as well. And so, it's one of those things where as a coach, I looked up to all those guys for sure. But, in the end, they're getting older and some new people are starting to come into play. And so it's good to see college basketball have a lot of parity in it for sure.
Yeah, and Bill Self at Kansas and Calipari are still in their 50s, almost 60. But yeah, you're mentioning with Roy Williams and Mike Krzyzewski in their 70s, a lot of that conversation nationally about has the game passed them by. And I hear what you're saying. I agree with you on that, especially as a young coach. In your case, you look up to those guys, and the future is now, as the great George Allen, the Hall of Famer, once said, the NFL coach. But I wanted to get to something. We talked about your Bulldogs. We're going to talk more about the Iowa Hawkeyes currently to this day. But something happened 28 years ago today that still reverberates and shook the state of Iowa. And we record this on Tuesday afternoon, January 19th. It's the 28th, I guess, for lack of a better term, anniversary or the marking day of the death of Chris Street, former Hawkeye basketball playing great. And you and I were talking off the air, and I would love for you to share this story with those on the air. Chris was a decade ahead of you, or that group. And then Jess Settles and I have talked many times on the air and off the air. We had Jess on a couple weeks ago, and we were even talking about Chris Street. But 28 years, it doesn't seem possible. But I'd like for you to share with us and the viewers the experience you had when you found out the news 28 years ago to this day that Chris Street passed away tragically.
Yeah, I was 9 years old, and I'll never forget it. I woke up that morning and getting ready to eat breakfast with my family and getting ready to go to school. And one of my sisters came in, and they said, "Hey, you'll never guess what happened." And and I obviously I didn't guess, but then they told me, they said that Chris Street had died in a car accident, and I was just shook, because obviously I grew up watching the Hawkeyes and I grew up watching him, and just to hear that was a blow. I don't think I spoke to anybody the rest of the day. And, just one of those things that just affects you. And I ended up writing a letter to Mike and Patty Street, when I was 9 years old, about just, how sorry I was and that type of thing. And then, how many ever years later, I think it was, right around 9-10 years later, I won the Chris Street Award, my freshman year at Iowa. And, I still say that that's the most prestigious award that I've ever won to this day. And, it's definitely a very humbling, award to win. And you don't want to win. You don't necessarily want that award to be there, but, there's no greater award to win than that if you're an Iowa Hawkeye, for sure.
Yeah, that is so well stated, and thanks for taking us inside your feelings and your experience, because, truly, as you mentioned, you grew up in Mason City, Iowa. You were Iowa Mr. Basketball. You go to Iowa. You committed to play at Iowa your freshman year in high school, and, that was your team for your whole life. And what a blow that must have been for not just a young Jeff Horner, but for all of us in the state. And I was living in California at the time when I got the news. But, yeah, what a earth-shattering moment that was for the Iowa Hawkeye basketball program, but just the state of Iowa in general. And when a young life like that is snuffed out, it's just so tragic. And as you mentioned, the auto accident. But so again, we honor Chris Street after 28 years in memoriam of his passing 28 years ago to this day, Tuesday, January 19th. But, Jeff, it's intriguing too to see how it's affected a guy like Jordan Bohannon too. And we saw that story a couple years ago when he intentionally missed that free throw. So Chris Street and he could have the consecutive free throw record still at Iowa. So Jordan, could have, should have, would have broken that, but he was honored to be on the record books with Chris Street, and that just tells even your story, even, exaggerates or takes it even farther into the future, and that's cool stuff. But mentioning Jordan Bohannon, he's now going to be passing your buddy, our guy around your time, Andre Woolridge, and he's only 4 assists away from passing him. Now he got 4 the other day. He's only 41 away from passing you. Those records are made to be broken, but, and you joked last week about Jordan having extra 10 games last year, but now the Michigan State game gets canceled and postponed. Last week when we talked on Tuesday, the game was still scheduled. So the Hawks only had 1 game. They played against, had a big victory against, a big victory against Northwestern on Sunday on national TV. Now the Nebraska game has been canceled for the weekend. So Iowa, as of right now on Tuesday, is playing Indiana at Carver Hawkeye. We talk about topsy-turvy with the national stuff with North Carolina, Duke, and Kentucky. But Iowa, if you're coaching and playing there, you're a former player, now a head coach. How are you handling this if you're a Hawkeye right now, Jeff?
Yeah, you just got to stay patient. Like I told you, and we talked to our team about every single week, is just being able to adjust. And, what happens, you can't look at, if a game gets canceled, it gets canceled, and you move on to the next one, and, you try to figure out or reschedule that game, hopefully. The biggest thing I think is that, I wish probably would have happened more is more talk about schedules just in general in college basketball, because when you're testing as many times as what everyone in the country is testing, it probably makes more sense to play a doubleheader back to back when you get to the conference games, like a Saturday, Sunday, type of thing. And unfortunately, it's just one of those things where, you take it with a grain of salt, but I think a lot of people, didn't really understand the rules of COVID and how it works, or the health department, how you get put in quarantine, isolation, all those things. And so, obviously the testing is really important, but in the same sense, I think scheduling could have been done a lot differently this year. And I think that's something to definitely, look at in the future in case, this happens to continue to go into next year. You just never know. So it's one of those things where hopefully it ends here pretty soon. That's what everyone's hoping, and we can move on from it.
Yeah, well stated by you. And you take a look at what Iowa did against Northwestern at Welsh Ryan Arena in North Chicago at Northwestern on Sunday, and national TV, Luka Garza with a double-double, 17 and 10. And as you and I talked about on radio yesterday, now we'll bring it to TV. Didn't even play essentially the last 10 minutes of the game. Iowa was ahead by so much. But he had 17 and 10. You had four other guys in double figures. The young guys got some more experience off the bench, played well, in the Keegan Murray's, Patrick McCaffrey's, Joe Toussaint, Jack Nungy getting quality minutes as always. And it's just fun to see a large group of guys. I mean, you got the top 9 or 10 on this team, and even Ulis got some extra time at point guard. And it's just nice to see these guys working into shape. As you mentioned, you're going to need them down the stretch as the year goes on into the tournament. But one thing I wanted to highlight with you and ask you, so you take a look at what Iowa did, winning handily against Northwestern, but then how does that bode coming into this Indiana game? Again, the viewers will have seen that game and know the result by the time they watch the show on Friday or afterwards online. But Thursday night, as we record this show on Tuesday afternoon, January 19th, on Thursday night, Iowa plays Indiana. What are you expecting from the Hawkeyes? Does this train keep rolling?
Yeah, obviously, like you said, they had a game canceled, that type of thing. But in the same sense, you got to be able to move on from it and not worry about what could have been, what should have been. And, I expect Iowa, who's a veteran team, to be able to come out and withstand that type of thing and be ready to play. So I'm sure that they're happy to be able to just play in a game. And I think that's just kind of the way you got to look at it.
Yeah, we'll see how they handle Coach Miller and the Hoosiers. And as you mentioned with the postponement, we've talked about earlier in this show and in this segment, postponement of the Michigan State game. Hopefully they can make that up in and around scheduling. Also with the Nebraska game. So the Hawkeyes clipping right along, number 4 in the country. We look forward to catching up with more victories as we talk. And good luck with you and your Truman State Bulldogs as we move forward too. You got another couple of big games upcoming. So I want to catch up with you next week on that. So Jeff, thanks as always for joining us here. I look forward to catching up with you next week, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
My pleasure as always. He is Jeff Horner, former Iowa Hawkeye basketball playing great, now the current head coach at Truman State University into year 3. In the top 10 again now, number 10 in the country, his 10-1 Bulldogs rolling along 5-game win streak. We look forward to catching up with Jeff next week. Want to thank Jeff and former quarterback for the Iowa Hawkeyes, James Vandenberg, David Eichholt, the Hawkeye Insider, and Joe Mershman. And thanks to you, the viewers, for tuning in and making us number 1 in late night here on Fox 28, and greatly appreciate your support. But please stay tuned for just a few seconds after this show when the credits roll and watch and also support our advertisers and sponsors of this show as the way they support me in this show. So thank you for that as well. So for again the aforementioned guests and to you the viewers, I'm Dave O'Hara with Hawkeye. That's all from me. Thanks to all of you.